Welcome to another episode of the Church Solutions Podcast. I couldn't remember what we call this. We've only been doing it for over a decade.
It's not the Church Pollutions Podcast.
The Church Pollutions Podcast. We're
Yes.
broadcasting live. I'm Phil Thompson.
And I'm Steve Lacy.
And this is episode number 347, according to Apple, but they're wrong.
You know the episode number, but you don't know the name of the podcast.
I don't know the name of the podcast. Yeah.
All right.
I was going to say Podcast Solutions Church or whatever, but it's Church Solutions Podcast. So subscribe to it. Those of you listening, make sure you subscribe to our podcast, but make sure you put the right name in, Church Solutions Podcast. Steve Lacy, how are you today?
Doing just peachy.
It's monsoon season here in Tucson. Did you get rain today?
We are.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I got some too, which is really good for us. Where I live, on the part of town I live in, I don't get the rain that you guys do.
Yeah, and we don't get the rain others do. So, where my son lives in town, it's a raining. So
yeah. Tucson is so spread out. The mountains around. All right. So today we're going to talk about 10 ways that you can end live streaming buffering. So, or at least you can, every once in a while something happens, but if we're going to talk about 10 things here you can do, maybe more than 10, that you can do that will really cut down on any buffering. Now, buffering, when we're talking about buffering here, I mean, the technical term is it's always buffering, but what we're talking about is, when the video is kind of skipping and pausing, that's what we're really talking about. And so, there's ways you can cut down on that.
Yeah, or looking just terrible, really pixelated. So it either stops or So
it's a fairly common problem if you have some setting issues, and we're going to go over those right now, so that it's not a common problem for you, but it does happen from time to time, and so it's frustrating, right? I mean, it's frustrating if you're at the church doing it, and then if you're on the other end as a viewer, it's frustrating when just the thing's stopping, starting, pixelating, going away, all that stuff. So
it is less common. Over the years, we were just reminiscing with some people about, remember when the super fast connection was the T1 at 1.5 megabits per second? Yeah. That was smoking. It was like $1,000 a month, something like that.
Our radio station had one. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's what we used to get the signal to the transmitter.
Yeah. In our early streaming days, I mean, our church bought a T1.
Right. I remember that.
In order to get a very consistent stream going. But now, everything's just gotten really better,
Yeah. Well, I remember when, and you obviously remember this with the days of Flash Media Live Encoder, where we told people you should probably set your encoder about 300 kilobytes per second. 200, 300, that'll work. We
ever went that low.
I did. I used to tell people that all the time, because some people didn't even have 1,000 kilobytes per second upload speed. Some people still don't, but depending on where you're at, what part of the country you live in, or what part of the world you live in. But I mean, it was really slow. And, you did 300 kilobytes per second on Flash Media Live Encoder, and you liked it.
And you could do it. I remember we had a booth at NAB in Vegas and broadcast over our cell phone. And the cell phone connection was, that was 3G at the time, probably. It was a long time ago. So the upload speeds were not great, but you could do it. It could work.
You could do it. All right. So I'm sure people are going like, well, come on, get to this thing. I want to find out, how can I improve? So let's just jump into it here.
All right. We got 10 things, right?
We got 10 things here. We might have more, and some of these are kind of related. So, but the first thing I put down here, and they're not all necessarily in order, but the first thing I put down in my notes was you really should do a speed test on your network before you stream. Because what we have found over the years of helping people, and we do tech support even on Sunday mornings, because we're a company that does streaming video, is that many times people run out of internet. And so it may be great for a year, and then all of a sudden something changes. So you should always do a speed test. And what you really should look at is your upload speed. And I always tell people they should have ideally 3 times what they're sending. That's what I tell people. Some people I'd say 2 times, but I say
but
3.
I pay for 10 megabits per second upload.
Yeah.
So I get 10 megabits per second upload, right?
Yeah. Good luck with that. Yeah. That's not always the case.
Yeah. We'll find that your speed is going to vary. And then you mentioned a key word there is, before you stream, because a lot of people will say, oh, Friday morning I looked and it's great. And so we're good to go. And then Sunday morning, like, wow, it's buffering, and they're giving us a call, and we're running, having them run speed tests, and they're like, wow, it was 10 megabits per second on Friday, and now I'm getting 500K. So
things change, weird things happen. Not to prolong this, but I can remember years ago when I was working at your church. We used to, here in Tucson, we would have golf tournaments, and I think we had Tiger Woods coming one year. And, we're streaming Sunday morning. I'm the church online guy. And all of a sudden we start buffering. We just start having issues. We have a lot of delay. Usually you'd have 30 seconds delay or something. It just, it was just getting weird. So I thought, man, this is really getting bad. I need to call tech support. And then I realized, wait a minute, I am tech support. And so, but what happened was we found out was the networks, the NBC or whatever out there, because of the golf tournament, they were stealing our bandwidth. And it happened 2 years in a row when there was a big golf tournament here in town. All of a sudden, Sunday morning, our bandwidth kind of disappeared.
Yes.
And it was frustrating. So all I'm saying is things change. Yeah. Sometimes there's technical problems. Sometimes somebody cuts a cable. Sometimes it rains. We were joking this week or last week about we had some weather here in Tucson, and all of a sudden we didn't have internet. It's like, what's the deal? It rains and we don't have internet. What's that all about? So weird things happen. So you should always do an upload speed test. I mean, speed test in general, and it will give you upload.
Yeah. So just not to dwell on this too much more, but do it from the encoding computer.
Yes.
And there's a ton of free ones out there. Yeah. And we have one, speed.streamingchurch.tv as well. But there's a bunch of them. We try to typically not recommend the most popular one, which is speedtest.net. Yeah. Because it tends to pick the closest server to you and will show overly optimistic numbers. So if you're going to broadcast, from your building to your, the front of your street, then it'll show you that you got great internet from there. But,
well, and they're like a lot of people like where we're at out here west, the Comcast is one of the providers that it's cable. And so it will basically, in fact, Comcast even knows if you use speedtest.net, my provider, Comcast, I think you have Comcast too. It knows when you do a speed test. It lets you know. It lets Comcast know you did a speed test. So we use a different provider, and we have one that's called speed.streamingchurch.tv, as you just mentioned. It actually goes to a different provider, and you can actually change where you want the test to go to. Like we have servers in Atlanta, Georgia. So I always tell people, choose the Atlanta server and then do a speed test.
Right. All right. So you can do your speed test. That's number one thing. And you should have, as you mentioned earlier, you should have 3 times the amount of upload speed. So if you're sending at a megabit per second, you want to make sure that you have 3 megabits per second, so that, because it's going to vary. I mean, even as you do the test, you'll see that the speed is varying up and down. Yeah. So,
and there's other factors too, which we'll get into down the list here.
Yes. All right. So we killed number one. We killed
number one. We beat it to death. Number 2, reduce the quality of the video in your settings. So if you're sending 1080p, that's a larger file that's going to be sent out. And if you're having buffering issues and you don't have enough internet, or and which we'll get to in a moment, your CPU on your computer might be laboring. We'll cover that in a moment as well. Reducing the quality of the video, like from 1080 to 720, can make a difference, and can help you.
Because the deal is, you find out that I've got 2 megabit per second upload. Unfortunately, there's usually very little you can do about that. I mean, you can call your your cable people, and they can send a tech out the following week and try to isolate where the problem may be. But a lot of times you're just stuck with, whatever that speed is. So this will allow you to remove the buffering by going in and reducing the video quality. So there's a couple of things there. There's some parameters: the resolution, which is the size of the image in pixels. There's frames per second. And one of the things that, people try to say, well, I want the highest quality possible, and we're going to go 60 frames per second. And the deal is, a lot of these things you don't need. Right. So, for example, if I was broadcasting a race or a basketball game, I'd want 60 frames per second. But I'm broadcasting typically a pastor or a worship band, and there's not a lot of movement going on. So 30 frames per second is more than adequate. And just going from 30 to 60 is going to double the requirements on your computer, and you won't see it. I mean, you won't see any difference in quality. You won't notice any difference in quality. So you want to kind of optimize your settings. So, and then the other key one is your bit rate. So there's resolutions and bit rate and frames per second. So you can tweak those. The key one is your bit rate.
Yeah, keyframe too. But some people, some encoders, if you choose a resolution, they have a video bit rate that kind of goes along with that. And on some of the encoders, the bit rates, in my opinion, inflated. So you might choose 1080p on a certain live encoder setting, and it just automatically will send the stream at 6 megabytes per second. And that's generally something you don't want, because that's too fast. And it can be a problem not only for you, but it could be a problem for people on the other end trying to watch it. So most of those encoders, most of them will give you that option of also lowering the bit rate. So you could still keep 1080p, but you could lower the bit rate from 6 megabytes per second to like 3 megabytes per second or something. And really, there's not that much of a difference between 3 and 5 or 6. Really is
visually.
Visually.
You won't. I'm sure we could do a taste test and have people pick out. You tell me which one is 3 and which one's 6. So, so I think most people won't ever notice.
Yeah. So if we may be, for some people, we may be getting over the head here. So if you ever have problems or questions, you can always reach out to us here. Okay. We're streamingchurch.tv. We'll help you clarify some of this. All right. So moving along here, where am I at here? So reduce the quality of the video and the settings. Shall we go on to number 3?
Yes. We're going to pick up the pace.
Pick up the pace here. So check your computer's processing level. That's number 3. So processor is really what kind of, how do I say this? What powers a computer in layman's terms. It's kind of like, would you call it the engine? Maybe, I don't know. How would you call that in layman's terms? But the processor sometimes can get overworked. And so if you have a live encoder on your computer, which is software based, like OBS or vMix or Wirecast or whatever, if you have too much going on, the processor in your computer, if it's not powerful enough, it gets overloaded. And so if you're running 70, 80, 90%, good luck. It's going to create skipping and buffering and all that.
That was you just answered my question. Okay. What is too much?
Yeah.
So anything over probably 75%, you're starting to get worried, right?
Yeah. I would keep an eye on it. It's 75%. Most of, if you're running 30, 40%, 50%, you're usually okay. So on your computer itself, there's a place to see the processing, but on most live encoders that are software based, you can find, it will tell you the CPU percentage, like on OBS, it will tell you that on vMix, it should tell you that on Wirecast, whatever else is out there. Most of them will give you a reading as you're streaming.
Yeah.
And some of them will even tell you, hey, we're in trouble, do something.
But it's also, just be careful, we'll get into some of the details of this, is some of those will give you the processor power that the encoder is using, but not necessarily the total computer CPU load. So, and that's going into our number 4 point, right?
Yeah.
Make sure your live encoder is not overloaded.
Yeah. So overloaded being, it's the live encoder, in case you're not really familiar with live streaming. The live encoder is really what makes your streaming video happen. We give you credentials. It sends a signal up to our servers, and then it goes back down from the cloud, on your website or something. And so if you have a lot going on in that live encoder, if you're recording at a high resolution, if you're streaming at a high resolution, if you've got you're doing a bunch of stuff with it.
Sending multiple streams to multiple destinations.
Multiple destinations, more than one stream, which opens up the door to running out of bandwidth, but that's another topic. But yeah, so
it's going to need to encode.
Yeah.
If you're sending to multiple destinations, it's got to encode for each destination. So
it's working hard. Yeah. So when it works hard, and if it doesn't have enough capacity, then it starts to peter out. And that's when you start running into issues again, where things aren't working, buffering, limited. So really look that over real good and go with that. So, all right, should we move on since we're moving
on? All right. And then, along those, I thought you had a separate bullet, but the other thing is, I've got my encoding computer streaming, I'm running ProPresenter, and we're also sending out the newsletter, all at the same time on the same computer. You just want to be careful.
Yeah. It's really, ideally, we recommend that you just have one computer for live encoding for streaming, and that's it. You don't do other stuff. We recommend that you don't run ProPresenter at the same time. There's people that do it, but again, you can run into some problems when you're running other programs as you're streaming.
Yeah. Again. All right. And then CPU. Next on our list, we haven't seen this in a while, I don't think, but it was very common earlier on. Yeah. So limit the number of devices connected to your network being your local church network.
Yeah.
So, and this is, because a lot of times when streaming was much more novel, the church would start streaming, and then they'd have offices throughout the church, and everyone would get on the stream to watch the stream from their offices. Yeah. And so everyone on the network is consuming bandwidth to be able to view the stream.
Yeah.
So, soon enough, they're calling us saying, hey, it's starting to buffer. What's going on? And we've got, run the speed test and find out what's going on, and found out they, and also, we've also seen where Sunday morning, I've got open Wi-Fi, and I want to offer that to all my churches, and the guys that come every week, and the phone auto connects to the network, and they get bored with the sermon and start watching NFL Sunday. And
no, come on, Christians don't do that.
Then all of a sudden, where's that bandwidth going? It was like, wow, we did have 10 megabits per second upload, or 50 meg, or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden,
internet atrophy. I don't know anybody that uses that term. I should copyright it. Internet atrophy. It's just your internet shrinks, and the more people on it, it will shrink. And it does happen at times when you least expect it, or whatever. It just happens. And so really you need to limit that. So how do you do that? How do you limit that? How do you limit other people from getting on your network?
Well, one would be to password protect your Wi-Fi, or what we do at our church is we have a separate provider for that kind of connection, so that we want to offer free open Wi-Fi to everybody, but we don't want to jeopardize the stream, so we'll run another ISP that services that traffic. So
internet service provider, so that keeps people off your main streaming network.
Or you password protect it, and then only give the password to those that request it. And the other is just get people off of their offices while the stream is going. And
can you partition your network? Can you partition it where
you might be? I'm not a router expert, but we're getting into the router piece. But I think you may be able to create different Wi-Fi networks, but
seems like if it's on the same provider, though.
Seems like if it's on the same ISP, it all goes through the same choke point. So it doesn't really matter.
It's all the same pipe eventually. Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Moving on here quickly. So here are some little technical things here. We've had this happen a lot. People call us and lost my internet, not working, blah, blah, blah. And so we sometimes you need to restart your router. So ideally, we would recommend, and I think I've got this on a point later, but some people, wireless is the only way you can stream. But if you can stream with Ethernet cable, that would be best. But regardless, or irregardless, you could, that's a joke because that's not a real word, right? Regardless of your situation, sometimes you need to restart your router, reboot everything, reboot the modem, reboot the router.
Yep. And yeah, I mean, it's a
bummer.
It's part of life. I know that, even in our home office here, we'll have issues where I'm like, wow, what's going on?
Yeah.
And a good reboot of the router tends to clear everything up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a simple thing to do. You could usually just unplug the thing and leave it unplugged for a few seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then plug it back in and give it time to kind of reboot. But if you have problems, if that's, obviously if it's happening all the time, then you need to investigate something. You need to get another router. Some routers go bad. And, maybe your router's updated. I just had what did I do? I think I just got a new modem or something because Comcast told me your modem's out of date. We're revamping things and your modem's going to be out of date pretty soon. So I end up coughing up money for a new modem. So things change and impermanence, right? And so things change. And so sometimes you got to restart things, do things. So let's move on here as my phone rings. So restart your router, your modem. Number 7, move your wireless router closer to your streaming device. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you're streaming wireless, we'd recommend you don't, but if sometimes that's all you got, just try to make sure you've got a clean path and something that's close to your machine.
Or what's really popular now, and I just had done this a while back for us, is just get a meshed router system where there's a network of wireless routers that you can place in different places, and so they will bounce.
How does that work? Do you plug it into your outlet or something? How does that work? How does the mesh thing work?
They need power. So your second item,
they're not battery operated. They're not magic. They're not solar.
Yeah, they're just radios. So your wireless router is just a radio. So it sends the signal to the next node, and the next node is a receiver and a transmitter.
Okay.
So it picks up that signal that's pretty close to it, and then transmits it, another 50 yards in that direction. If you stick another router, a third one down the road, then it'll do the same thing. You could run your Wi-Fi all the way down your street if you have enough routers. But,
I have an old extender, but an old Wi-Fi extender. I still have that. It's in my garage.
They go off the same principle.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, they sell them now so that they're a mesh of routers that are optimized for sharing the stream as opposed to an extender. Extenders typically didn't work as well.
Yeah.
But it's the same kind of principle though.
Yeah. Now my son's got something he plugs into an outlet. And
you can use your home wiring as
that's what he did.
Yes, as a carry the signal over the home electrical signals. Well, we're getting off target here, but
I know.
improve your Wi-Fi is kind of what that one's all about.
Yeah.
And then that was number 7. So number 8 is, if you can't improve your Wi-Fi, move to a wired connection. Run some Ethernet cables.
That's ideal. That's really ideal. That's really what you should do if you can, and that makes a big difference. In many cases, it does. Some people are fine with wireless, but things go wrong. All right, so we're getting close to Steve's lunch, so we need to move on here. Number 9, as we talk about eliminating buffering from your live streaming, number 9 is keep your computer healthy. So feed your computer whole wheat and kale and all that stuff. What I mean by that is just simply, make sure you don't have malware and viruses running. And if you just have a computer set up for streaming and nobody else messes with it, that's half the battle, right? But if you have the youth guys in there, and not to blame, the youth people always get in trouble. But if you have other people on the computer, I mean, we've had people talk to us and go, "Hey, I've got porn on this computer. Did that come from you guys?" No, it didn't come from us. Somebody's on your computer, and it's not us. So you've got to really make sure your computer's running well. Keep it healthy. You may have to add some RAM. Depending on the operating system you got. Maybe some kind of maybe some antivirus stuff. Maybe Windows Defender, I guess, is pretty good, according to Dan Patagoni.
This is an area that's gotten much better over the years too.
Yeah, it has.
Being an old geezer like me, I kind of So, but this arena has gotten a lot better with Microsoft's done a much better job of recognizing that they're a target for trouble. And so they've really upped their game and made a much more robust OS than they did before.
But keep an eye on your computer if you use it for streaming. If you have a software, I mean, if it's taken forever to boot up now, your hard drive may be going. A solid state hard drive would be great. If you could get one of those, they're usually easy to replace. They're quicker. Maybe some more RAM might be needed. But keep an eye on that, because if your computer's dragging, and they will drag, as you used to say, Steve, you get your new computer and it works good for a few months, and then all of a sudden,
well, your Windows computer, yes,
your Windows computer, let's not, because there's nothing wrong with Apple computers. Apple computers are flawless.
Yes,
the Macs are just great.
They will run 2 years in like they did the first week, but as I said, Windows has gotten a lot better. So I'm dating myself, I guess, but 10 years ago it was like, you need to reinstall the OS every 2 years or you're out of luck, So wipe the whole thing clean, because it's become this trash pile. But
I've had this thing for years. This thing runs pretty good. I can't put Windows 11 on it. It won't let me now because it's too old, I guess. All right. And very quickly here, number 10, there's probably more, but number 10, make sure your hardware-based live encoder. Now, remember, there's two types of encoders. There's software-based that we've been primarily talking about, like OBS that you put on your computer. But then there's hardware-based live encoders, and those are little boxes usually. Epiphan has some, Teradek has some. There's lots of them out there now, and they're okay. Make sure though that it's shut down after you stream. So what I'm getting at is, like we put the Webcaster out years ago, but I have customers that still call me about the Webcaster, which I don't make anymore, which is a hardware-based live encoder, and they just leave it on the whole time. They may shut the stream off, but the deal's on. It's running the whole time. It's booted up. It gets hot, and hardware encoders, as well as computers, should be shut down when you're done streaming. And I've had that happen a lot, where they had to shut down the hardware encoder, let it boot up again, sometimes reset it, and then usually it's okay. But if you just leave it run the whole time, you're asking for trouble eventually.
Yeah.
Just saying.
That's true. Maybe more convenient. Like, I'm out of here. My Sunday's over. I'm going home.
Yeah.
It may take a second and power it down.
Just power it down, and power down your computer. Shut your computer down. It's just, look, we're just trying to save you some heartache, right? So those things happen if you don't shut your stuff down after. All right, so we're out of time here, as I'm sure you're glad, so you can go eat lunch now. But if you have any questions, those of you being listeners, viewers, reach out to us. Support at streamingchurch.tv. That's one of our companies here. And we can certainly help you with your streaming needs, or some other things as well. So don't hesitate, reach out to us. So Steve, Lacy, thank you for your input today.
Great to be here.
And my name is Phil Thompson. Thank you for watching or listening to the Church Solutions Podcast. Be sure and subscribe to the Church Solutions Podcast. You'll never miss a podcast. And if you can, give us a rating. Rate our podcast. We'd love to get a rating from you, and we'd love to hear from you. All right, so that's it. Have yourselves a great day. We'll catch you next time. Take care of yourselves and each other. And thanks again for listening to the Church Solutions Podcast.